Whether we're staying in a campground or boondocking out in a beautiful area like this, we want to get around and explore once we're here. Now, of course, we can take a hike or we can take our bikes out and explore, but there are lots of times we want to go further than they'll take us. Now, breaking camp with a big motorhome like this and trying to take it into tight places to go exploring isn't really practical. Now, if we had a fifth wheel like Tom and Kate have, they've got an automatic exploration vehicle as part of their rig. They simply drop their fifth wheel in the campsite and they can take their pickup truck and go exploring. Motorhomes don't have that luxury. Once we're hooked up, especially with a big one like this, it's not practical to go out and use it to explore. So, like many people, we bring a car along and we use the most popular method of doing that, and that's a tow bar. Now, there are more pieces required than just the tow bar itself. I'm going to go over all the components needed to flat tow 4 wheels down behind a motorhome.
When setting your RV up for flat towing, several components are required. A hitch receiver and base plate, an umbilical cord to communicate braking and other lighting functions from the RV to the tow vehicle, and breakaway protection are all essential. And of course, an obvious place to start would be with the tow bar itself, which in Peter and John's case is a Roadmaster Nighthawk.
One of the things to consider about choosing a tow bar is its towing capacity. Some tow bars can tow 5,000 pounds or 8,000 pounds or 10,000 pounds. It all depends on the weight of the car that you're towing. Our Honda weighs less than 4,000 pounds. Pretty much any tow bar on the market would do the job, but we have a tow bar that has a higher rating than that. It makes sure no matter how much we load our car up with, and sometimes it's a lot, we can tow it safely. And if we decide to replace our CRV with a heavier car, we won't have to change our tow bar to make that switch. Tow bars can either be mounted to the RV or to the car. This tow bar mounts to the RV and we never ever take it off. The only reason we would take the tow bar off is if we were gonna switch motorhomes and move the tow bar to a new one. It makes it really easy. When we get to our destination, we simply disconnect all the cables, stow the arms, swing the tow bar up against the back of the RV, and it stays right here stowed in place, and it just stays there, and we never have to bother with it. We can drive the RV without the car connected, and it doesn't make any difference. It's a lot handier than the older style where they were connected to the front of the car. Now, obviously, the tow bar is the main component here, but you can't use it if you don't have some other things to go with it. We have to have a hitch receiver. Without a hitch receiver on the motorhome, you can't put the tow bar in it or tow anything. Luckily, lots of motorhomes come with those, or they can be installed aftermarket. The other piece is on the other side, and that is the base plate on the car. The car doesn't come with a way to just connect the tow bar to it, of course. It has to be put in. Now, when we were at the Roadmaster factory, we saw what a big deal it is to make base plates. And that's because every single car uses a different base plate. You can't just take one and have a one-size-fits-all setup. Now, the other things that come across here include the umbilical. This brings lights, communication to the braking system, and of course, left and right turn signals, four-way flashers, tail lights, brake lights. Those all come through this umbilical that connects this electric port to this electric port that was installed on the car. Now, in the extremely unlikely event that the car should separate from the RV, we need breakaway protection. These cables right here take care of that. If the car should detach from the tow bar or the tow bar should detach from the motorhome, again, extremely unlikely, these steel cables will make sure the car stays behind. If this cable is pulled out of the front of the car, it activates the brakes, and that will keep the car from banging into the back of the motorhome and allow you to come to a safe stop with the car pulled tight on the cables. Now, I also mentioned that there's a signal to the brake system that comes through the umbilical and a breakaway cable that could activate the brakes. That requires a special braking system that has to be installed separately in the car. Now, there's a number of different ways that can be accomplished, and some of that will depend on whether you're a part-timer or a full-timer and how often you use your RV or how often you change cars. You can go with a portable type of brake system that sits in front of the driver's seat and depresses the brake pedal each time you step on the RV's brake pedal. In our case, the braking system we have is completely invisible and permanently installed and doesn't require any special steps each time we connect and disconnect the car. There's nothing to put in or remove from the car, nothing to activate. It's just always there. And when it comes to lighting, the lighting on the back of the car can either be permanently installed in the car or removable. Again, just like our brake system is fully installed, our lighting system is fully installed and we don't have to touch it. The power comes through the umbilical and there's nothing extra to do to get the lights to work.
With all the components in place, there's nothing left but to connect the RV to the tow vehicle using the tow bar, which, with a bar like the Nighthawk, is a much simpler process than you might expect.
So the steps for connecting are very simple. We pull the car up behind the RV, we connect each of the arms to the tow clips on the front of the car on the base plate, we attach our umbilical, attach our safety cables, and attach our breakaway cable. We don't have to pull forward in the RV until we're ready to leave. We just want to do that slowly so the arms will extend as we pull away. Now, this one has articulating arms that can move independently of each other, and these rods can slide in and out. It allows us to hook the car up without positioning it perfectly behind the RV. The car can be at a bit of an angle, it can be slightly off center, a little closer or further. The arms just come out and easily attach without precisely placing the car in place. As soon as we go to pull away, they'll automatically extend to their full length and lock in position. They won't slide in and out while you're driving down the road because these locking mechanisms right here keep them out. If we were going to disconnect, we lift these levers up, and that allows us to move the rods in and out and disconnect the car. We've been RVing in a motorhome for going on 20 years now, and the entire time we've been flat towing this car using a tow bar. We know there are other methods that are popular with some people for various reasons, dollies or trailers, but there isn't any simpler, easier way to connect and disconnect to bring your car along than a tow bar. You've just had a great time camping off the grid, and your tanks are full. Now what? There are two basic places that RVers can dump their holding tanks. One, of course, is at a full hookup campground where you have a sewer connection, and the other is at a dump station. Now, if you're in transit, you may not want to stop at an RV park just for the purpose of dumping because you're going to pay for a whole night's stay just to dump your black and gray and fill your freshwater tank. So that's when a dump station comes in handy, most of the time when we're in transit or if we're going from one boondocking site directly to another and we want to simply stay out off the grid, just a fast stop at a dump station on our way past is the way we'll go. It's less expensive even when there's a fee involved. You're going to need some supplies to dump your holding tanks, and the very first one is gloves. You can either use thick gloves that you keep and reuse and wash periodically, or more commonly, you'll see disposable gloves that you use once and then throw out. Of course, you're also going to need a sewer hose of some sort. There are many different types. Now, ours is stored in a special compartment in the side of our rig, which means we can't use any type of sewer hose. It has to have a bare end on one side, otherwise it won't go in that slot. Now, you may have a special spot like this on your RV, and it limits connections that you can have permanently attached to either end. If that's the case, you'll want to do like we do and make sure one end of your sewer hose has nothing attached to it. Besides the connection that's going to attach the sewer hose to your RV, you're going to have an attachment on the other end that will allow you to firmly connect to the sewer line. In many states or counties or some municipalities, there are regulations mandating that you have a solid connection to the sewer outlet and you can't just put your hose in it. Another important component to have for dumping is what's called a clear sewer elbow, because the only way you're going to know for sure that your tanks are dumped fully is when you see clear water flowing through that clear elbow. If you have a sewer flush connection built into your RV, you're also going to want to have a length of hose to connect from the spigot to that connection. That way you can turn on the water to flush the black tank out while you're dumping your tank to make sure it's thoroughly cleaned. To protect the freshwater system at the park, you're also going to want to have a backflow preventer just to be certain you're protecting the freshwater system in the park. Here are the steps in order of how you flush your tank. First, you want to hook up to the sewer system in the park or go to the dump station and connect your sewer hose to the outlet on your RV. Most RVers know that you always dump the black tank before dumping the gray tank so that you can use the gray water to flush out the sewer hose after you're done. But here's a little tip you might not have heard. When you are ready to dump, pull the gray valve and leave it open for about 5 or 10 seconds and then close it. And what you're doing is you're checking to make sure that there are no leaks in the connections. If you're going to find out that your sewer hose has a leak, better to find out with gray water coming through it rather than black water. Now it's time to pull the black valve, and if you have a built-in flush system, it's time to turn that on as well. Continue flushing the system out until the water runs clear. This is where being in your own campsite at a full hookup park has that advantage over a dump station. If it takes a little time for the water to run clear in your sewer elbow, you don't have people waiting behind you eager to use the dump station. If you don't have a built-in holding tank flush system, you can buy a wand that's designed to be put down the toilet to flush the tank out from above. Either way, it's a good idea to thoroughly flush the black tank every time you dump. Once the water in the sewer elbow runs clear, you can turn off the flush system and close the black valve. Then you can open the gray and allow all of the gray water to run out. Once the gray tank is empty, you can close that valve as well. And even if you're staying at a full hookup RV park, we recommend keeping the gray valve closed to make sure that any odors from the park's sewer system don't come into your RV. The last thing you'll usually do when you dump your black and gray tanks is to fill your fresh water tank. Now, if you're at a dump station, for sanitary reasons, they usually don't have the potable freshwater fill in the same place as the dump. They usually have it further ahead where you may need to drive your RV forward to hook up to the freshwater line. Of course, if you're at your own full hookup site for the night, you'll have access to fresh water to fill your tank right there. With your wastewater tanks dumped and your freshwater full, you're ready to go back out off the grid for another self-contained adventure.
One of the greatest things about traveling is being able to share your experiences. And because every adventure is different, this makes telling your story an inspiration to anyone who's destined for life on the road.
Today's a special day for the both of us. Today's our anniversary. We've been married 53 years.
Speaking of destiny, if you believe opposites attract, well, that's not the case here, as Ken and Bernice share a memorable interest that brought them together.
Camping.
Believe it or not, camping.
Yeah.
I was 15 years old, and I think she was only 14. Because it's not quite a year's difference. It's 51 weeks. We were both born in June. They told us it wouldn't work. It would never work out, you know?
My friend said,
We got married too young, out of high school.
it'll never work. It'll never work.
And believe it or not, we've lasted them all.
First comes love, then comes the rig.
The place where we bought this one, it was closed, but the gate was open. So we drove in. We figured, you know, somebody was in there. Nobody was there. They were all locked up. But somebody left this one open for some strange reason. And we went inside and we looked at it. And we loved it. So then we left. And we went other places looking around. But they didn't compare to the Leprechaun Coachman. We loved it. The layout is beautiful, just what we wanted.
Although it seems fated how the couple came to call this Leprechaun home, there's one feature that didn't quite meet their expectations.
It had a couch, but it was so uncomfortable. You know, you couldn't sit long to watch TV. I thought, oh, this is gonna go. We missed our recliners at home, you know, sit back. So we went to like a Bernie and Phil's. He had 2 of them. They were on sale. They were beautiful, just what I want.
And with so many miles behind them, Ken and Bernice have this advice for beginners.
Rent one or see if they like it first before I advise them to.
Oh, to buy one, yeah. Just rent one to try
What
it.
do they want it for? Do they really want to travel with it, have vacations? Or is it something they think that they would love so much that they want to live in it?
So it seems like the moral of this story can apply to both finding love and finding a love for RVing. Simply follow your heart, but consider a test drive first.
Obviously, one of the great things about RVing is that you have all the comforts of home, but the power supply when you're not hooked up in an RV park is a little different than people are used to in their homes. And one of the most important pieces of gear that makes that possible is called an inverter. So I'm gonna talk with Tom about that today because, Tom, you're an electrical engineer, right?
I am an electrical engineer.
So you really know about this stuff.
I guess you could say that. The RV always has at least 2 electrical systems, sometimes 3. And the first primary electrical system is a 12-volt system. That's powered by the batteries in the coach. Sometimes those batteries are recharged by shore power, solar power, or even alternator power off the engine. But a lot of times we want to be able to use the AC power, or the alternating current, the same as we have in our house, but we can't do that unless we're running a generator or plugged into shore power, unless we use a special component called an inverter, which converts that DC power, which you get from the batteries, into AC power like we use in our home. 12 volts DC is direct current, and it's a steady voltage, and the voltage doesn't move. But what we have in our homes is usually 120 volts, sometimes 240 volts, and that current is alternating. So what it does is it actually moves up and down in a sine wave. So you need a very special piece of electronic that actually converts the power from this steady state 12 volts into a much higher voltage, first of all, usually the 120 volts or 240 volts, and also modulates it to create what's called a sine wave.
Is an inverter something that comes on all RVs to make sure you can run things?
Not necessarily. A lot of RVs come without an inverter because not all RVs need them. If you're taking an RV out just for a short period of time, your lights, your water pump, all the appliances in the RV work on the 12-volt DC.
So we have a diesel pusher, more expensive, includes more equipment. Ours came with an inverter, which actually was an inverter and a battery charger combined.
There are a big variety of different inverter styles, but an inverter charger is very common to be used in the RV because it can push power both ways. You can take AC power and charge batteries with it, and it can also take the battery power and turn it into AC power, and that's called an inverter charger unit. That's probably one of the best choices to use in an RV because you can eliminate additional charging componentry and have everything in one box, basically.
What about the size of the inverter?
So inverters can get as large as needed. In an RV, however, most common size is usually a 2,000 to 3,000 watt capable inverter. And this is going to be able to run most of your larger appliances, your microwave, your hair dryer. It's not going to run the entire coach. You might be able to run, say, one air conditioner, but you're not going to be able to run an air conditioner and a microwave at the same time. And you also have to consider that those higher load applications are going to draw the battery down significantly.
That's exactly what I was going to ask. I know that most RVs in general are not really set up or capable of running an air conditioner off the batteries, right?
That's correct. A lot of times if you design a system that's large enough to power a 2,000 or 3,000 watt inverter, sometimes it'll start the air conditioner, but it's not going to run for very long. You're going to draw those batteries down very, very quickly.
So if you have a 1500 watt hair dryer, can you run that off a 1500 watt inverter, or is there some space that needs to be built in?
Usually you want to look at a slightly larger size inverter than the largest load that you're looking for in the RV. And this is because there are some inefficiencies in the system itself. You're going to have additional loads. You might have a computer running when you want to run the microwave or something. And if you turn it all on, a lot of times the inverters do have basically an overload capacity where they can go slightly beyond that for a short period of time. So you might not have issues, but if you're trying to run the microwave for, say, 2 minutes, you might overload that inverter and the system will shut down on you. Another thing to consider with inverters is that they draw power just to be on. They have electronics and circuitry in them that are always drawing power.
And by definition, the inverter, the main purpose of the inverter is for when you're not hooked up to shore power, when you're boondocking, and again, by definition, that's when you most want to conserve battery power.
One thing that is really beneficial when using an inverter off-grid on your batteries is to shut it off when you're not using it. When you go to bed at night, if you don't need to run appliances overnight, then you can shut the inverter off and it's not going to have that steady state draw overnight, and you're going to save energy that way.
Those of us who've been RVing for a while have heard of the two main types of inverters, and that is modified sine wave and pure sine wave. We know that from what we've heard, that pure sine wave is the superior technology. What's the difference between them, and is that true? Is pure sine wave the way to go if you're willing to spend the money?
Electronics and appliances prefer the pure sine wave because there's not additional harmonics and noise in the system that can actually get in and kind of do some damage or put additional stresses on the appliances. You can actually hear it if you were to use a modified sine wave inverter and plug like a computer power supply, like a laptop power supply that gets kind of warm. And that buzzing is because of the harmonics and basically the sharp cuts in that voltage. It's a lot, it kind of hammers those electronics a lot harder. And over time, it's not as good for them. So when possible, using a pure sine wave inverter is definitely the preferable choice.
Well, I want to say a particular thank you to you for being our guidance as we designed the system that we installed in that travel trailer, knowing that you looked at the plans and gave your blessing to them, that you felt like we were being safe and understood what we were doing, made it so we could do that as a DIY project without having had special training to do it. But it does require quite a bit of confidence and a good consult from someone who really knows what's going on.
Yes, it's usually best to at least consult with an electrician or someone who has done it before.
And if someone isn't going to be doing it themselves, which most people probably wouldn't take on a project like that, most manufacturers have resources on their websites that can send them to a qualified installer. And that way they don't have to take it on unless they're really confident they can do it themselves. Having an inverter has completely changed being out here off the grid. It's made it so we can live like we're in a sticks and bricks house comfortably.
Yeah, same here. Inverters really open up the world to off-grid comfort in really any off-grid situation. RVs are a prime example, but inverters can be used in boats. They can be used in off-grid cabins and homes. They are such versatile tools to be able to turn DC power, which is your solar power, is wind power. Any of these other alternative power sources always need an inverter to be able to use the power as if we were hooked up to the grid.
Even though we're out here off the grid, an inverter allowed us to make our coffee this morning.
Yes, so cheers to inverters.
I'll drink to that.